Hi everyone, welcome to my talk. And as Michael was saying, I will be talking mostly about architecture, but I think this is really connected with Agile too. But before I start, let's just do some exercise. So who of you is doing Agile or doing to achieve higher agility? Quite a bunch. And trying to improve architecture and achieve higher agility by improving architecture. A bit less. So I hope I inspire some of those with this talk. And when I talk about architecture, I don't just mean designing something and making some nice drawings. I talk about learning, designing, and deciding. In my view, all of those need to be coming together when we are doing architecture, if we want to do architecture in the environments that we are working on and living on today. So hopefully, I will give you some ideas on basically achieving what I'm calling architecture organization topologies that allow us to achieve higher agility, or what I also like to call sustainable fast flow of change. So how can our organizations sustainably cope with the change that is needed to cope with our environments? Because whether we like it or not, the old ways of working that we used to have on the 80s, 90s, and we still have a lot today, if we are not, those organizations that are still working on those fashion and are not enabling the sustainable learning, designing, and decision-making, they will struggle to cope with the changes that are always happening on the environment. Can anyone guess where this is? It could be here, actually. There is quite a lot of nice bike tracks. But this is in Amsterdam. So I come from Amsterdam, and here on the bottom you can see me driving a weird bike with 2 kids. So I was just going to the park, and suddenly I just got this huge queue of bikes on a place that it used to be very quiet. This is a neighborhood with families, and there is not much going on. However, here I am taking a picture and thinking maybe I will use this in a conference one day. And this is the second time I'm using it because I think this reflects a lot of the ideas that I want to talk about today, which has to do with unexpected things happening, unpredictable things happening. So what happened here was that somehow there was a huge queue of big boats passing by. You see a bridge there, sort of opened, and they were just passing by, and we got a huge queue of bikes there. But you don't see anyone sort of panicking because these people are used to handle unexpected situations. It's rather common to open a bridge, and when they saw the queue, they started probably imagining, okay, maybe there are multiple boats passing by, but we will eventually get by. And I find this biking system in the Netherlands and particularly in Amsterdam fascinating because if you visit the city, it's a very small and narrow city, but almost every day you have, I think, there are around 1 million bikes in the city, and you have multiple 100,000 of bikes every day just going by, and you don't see a lot of issues. You see some people screaming every now and then, but the people learn to cope with this and embrace this unexpected situation of driving a bike in this environment. Furthermore, and very interestingly for us, when we talk about architecture and agility too, is that the city invested heavily on creating a very good enabling infrastructure for us to navigate and cope with these sort of situations. So I think this is very interesting for us today, and I hope you keep this in mind, sort of this mindset, as we go through the day. And another thing, because I already started talking a lot about learning, I also want to share this definition of learning that I found somewhere, which highlights some things that we don't often hear about when we talk about learning, which is the fact that learning is a process that leads to change, which occurs as a result of experience. So all of these people riding their bikes and learning, and increases the potential for improved performance and future learning. So this is why when I'm talking about architecture, I always mention learning, because this is a way for us to be able to actually see how can we improve or address these important decisions we need to make. But again, it's not just about learning, sort of seeing and experience. It's also being able to leverage that learning to design and decide. Like what we all did here. We just stopped and we didn't panic and try to go around, because we sort of saw, okay, we should probably wait just a bit. It will be over soon. So I will come to content, but I had to share this story because yesterday morning I was very happy on Amsterdam Central Station. Beautiful picture. My train was supposed to be a direct train here to Berlin. And 5 minutes before the train departed, I got this message. Probably you cannot understand, so this is Dutch. Maybe some of you can. But basically what it says is, well, there was a big accident somewhere nearby the border with Germany on the route of the train. So there may be some disruptions to your trip, in your trip. And I was like, oh man, I was counting with this time to actually finish up my talk, and I had these 6 hours, so nice to do my work. But yeah, I knew something was coming. And the train engineer, a very nice lady, was sharing with us the information she could share. Like, I have no clue if we are going to get through, but I will keep you informed that I'm going to try to navigate this situation. However, like 1 hour later, she told us, now you need to get off of the train, pick up a bus, go to the next station, and maybe there you will be able to get another train. So there I am in the bus, not extremely happy with the situation, and then waiting for another train. Eventually it came, and I made it. So I managed to come. But this was a very interesting situation that I wanted to just bring up again, which is similar to the biking situation, which is this thing that we are continuously being affected by our environment. The systems we are building, the things we are creating in our organizations, they will be affected by that. The competitors that we have are not going to stop. They will keep on doing things. The market is going to keep on doing things. And we as organizations, we need to be able to listen to that. Modern organizations cannot ignore that. We are not anymore in the old, very closed factory with everything controlled. Most of us building software live in open environments. And Dave Snowden and friends articulated this very well in the Cynefin framework. Maybe some of you have heard about it. But in a nutshell, it talks about predictable domains where we can use best practices, where we can sort of see, okay, yeah, in this situation we will apply this, in that situation we will apply that. But we have situations, so you can plan things on that side. Things are not going to change much. But on this side, things are much more unpredictable. And I think most of the modern organizations we work on, they are somewhere here. They do a lot of things in this side. So best practices are not enough. We need to probe, to experiment what works and not. So many organizations nowadays do A/B tests to figure out, okay, the customer likes this. Or they do some release with a group of people to see, do they really like this or not? Or what should we be learning? And then, based on that, they will figure out how to go forward and respond. However, this is where I think many things go wrong in many organizations, which is the fact that we keep on focusing on best practices, on making big plans to solve everything, when we are living or doing a lot of things in the unpredictable spaces. And this can be a lot of trouble, because we are going to keep on planning. We cannot see things. We plan something that doesn't completely address the situation. And yeah, so the bottom line here is those controlling operating models that we get as sort of legacy from many years of working in environments that are more predictable, but also that the idea of the ivory tower architects, like we are able to plan everything and just throw this to the team, and then they will be doing it, and everything is going to, we can estimate and make sure that this is going to the plan. That's not going to work well in complex environments. And to exacerbate things, I want you to reflect on this sketch for a little, let's reflect on this sketch for a little moment. So the orange line there depicts the rate of change on innovation, market expectations, customer expectations. So if you think, I'm 40-something years old, so when I was born, I had no computer, I had no smartwatch, smartphones, nothing of that. My kids are now with that since they were born. This is 40 years, it's not a lot, right? So, and the pace of that rate of change is not slowing down. We keep on having more of that. However, and as I'm already reflecting from the previous examples, the way our organization operating models are improving, the rate of change there is not so high. We have Agile, we have DevOps in some pockets of the organization, but overall, the whole organization still has a lot of controlling and silos and information not going by, etc. But somehow, those innovations are coming to the market. It's not magic, someone is doing them. And this is us, right? And so either our operating models are amazing, or, which I think is the case, we achieve that by stretching our teams, by throwing people to the problem, by inventing overly complex frameworks. I'm talking about you, Safe, and friends. And for those of you that heard about Conway's law, all of that complexity of designing and organizing the teams, the communications, that goes into our technical systems. So the outcome is we keep on doing that, but we keep on adding more and more complexity in our systems. So the next things we are going to do become even more complex to do. I'm not inventing, but using this thing, so it's not technical debt anymore. For me, it's socio-technical accidental complexity and debt. So we are creating more and more complex social systems, organizational systems, and we are also getting more complex technical systems and debt. And this leads to all sorts of uncool things, such as doing what we are all trying to get rid of, which is not increasing costs, but we are going to increase costs by doing that, and waste, because we need more people. We need to find an expert that can somehow figure out how can we add this field in this database that connects with that. And we have, like I heard this week, to do a little change on a field of the front end. We have 10 teams that need to get involved and a few people to just realize how we can do that. So that leads also to decreasing sustainability on how are we maintaining these things. And the last but not the least, decrease of happiness. So we will be probably rather unhappy to keep on doing that. And this will feel like we are sort of continuously fighting against this environment, right? So the innovations will keep on being needed. We will need to do that. But also internally, we have all of these things that are happening that we need to fight with. So these sort of mechanistic organization structures, controlling operating models, they limit the dynamics and agility that modern organizations need. So we need to do something like this. And this is idealistic, but the point is, we cannot just keep on doing these little tweaks here and there. Organizations may need that to embrace that sometimes they need to make bigger changes to address challenges that they are facing. Challenges that are not just solved by having yet another meeting or coordinating that these 40 teams need to be talking with each other to do this little tweak. And that's tough. And I think we try to avoid it just with these little small things, small ceremonies. So I'm all in for agile, but I think agile is not enough. We need to do more. We need to sort of cultivate organization cultures, structures, and incentives. Because many times these bigger changes are not happening because the managers there in the middle, they don't get incentivized to do that. They are more incentivized for managing more people or for focusing on pushing people to deliver things. So, but all of these, we need to embrace them so that we sort of go from these mechanistic operating models and cultures where learning is not that promoted or incentivized. Designing is happening by someone outside of the teams. Decision-making is happening outside of the teams, far from the problems. And we need to go into operating models that we try to maximize learning. Like, if we are learning something, can others benefit from that? And design is happening closer to the problems and not needing to meet with 30 teams to do a little change. The same for decision making. Okay, let's get into more, how can we start doing something about that? So I will spend the rest of the talk talking about some ideas that I've been exploring that go into looking into that. And what I'm focusing on here is something that I call Architecture Organization Topologies. So this is an article I wrote like 2 years and something ago. And the idea was triggered by some discussions at that moment, which is being more explicit on how is our organization approaching architecture? Are we thinking about that? Or are we just going with the flow? Because the way we are approaching architecture, so if you think like, oh, there is no one catering for architecture, oh, we have architects. the scopes, say the teams and maybe multiple teams are actually driving architecture, or maybe some situations, there are some people there, like everybody is part of architecture and architecture decision making. Those tend to relate highly with like how is the sustainable fast flow of change or agility in our organizations. Here you tend to have like much less learning, and decision making is slow, everything is more complex. But as you start working on those and things that are behind those, you tend to go to situations where learning is promoted, designing is happening closer to the problems, and everyone feels more empowered to be part of that. So what I started playing with is, and this is just one of the things I've been playing with on this idea of architecture organization topologies, which is how are we approaching architecture on our teams, across of our teams, across of the organization. Maybe you have other structures around teams that would also show here. So this is just an example. How are they approaching architecture? So you can start reflecting a bit of where are we on this journey. And you can start seeing, okay, here we may need to do something. What do we need to do? So I will share the slides afterwards, but then you can check more about this. But I want to share the rest of the talk an example of an organization that embraced these sort of changes. And this is bol.com. So this is the biggest online retailer in the Netherlands and Belgium. And as you can see, I was just talking before, having a chat before the talk. It started roughly like the other big worldwide online retailer, Amazon, end of the 90s, selling books. And then they started selling all sorts of things. They had no plan of what this was going to be, but by experimenting and learning what would make sense, they eventually even sell drinks and all sorts of things. So there are the things they sell. In the middle, you have like big services they are building, and on the bottom, big events of this organization. And what I will be sharing with you is how their organization looked like, how their technical architecture looks like on this journey, and then how their approach to architecture looks like. Like many companies at the start of the 2000s, so how were they organized? Very much on a sort of having projects and a waterfall way of working. Some big monoliths, which is, there is nothing wrong for someone starting working on a new business. And architecture was driven by a central group of architects. But like these businesses at that time, when the 2000s started going by, they started to get a lot of things going on. So the environment was asking for a lot of things. They got into a moment that their every 2-month release cycle was not enough for them. So they needed to invest on scaling. This is how their approach to architecture looked like. The architects were just doing architecture as a bunch and then throwing this to the teams, or even some contractors doing some work, some projects. And on that iteration that they did, on that change on their organization, they started adopting Agile, DevOps teams, quite a few of them already in around 2010, 2012, like 30 teams already, building and evolving there, started breaking the monoliths into microservices, and the team started having more sort of ownership of their scope of work. The design and decision-making, or their scope of work, was already rather part of their teams. So this is what happened there. So they explicitly invested on making sure that the team is sort of owning the architecture, decision-making on their scope of work. And the architects still stayed and were working on everything connecting teams, everything that happens around teams. So this allowed for them to start scaling a lot and cope with building all of those products that I was showing there. So those teams could work rather independently and be able to quickly iterate and build things on their scope. So they had their own microservices, they could deploy them, they could do their thing without having to coordinate with everyone. And teams were able to design and decide on their scopes of work without having to always wait on the architects to tell them what to do and when and how. However, if you start fast going a few years and you start having more and more teams, I think they were doubling every 2 years of number of teams. So 2017 or so, there were like already 100 teams. So many teams started popping up. The teams were DevOps teams, but we still had the product people or product side of the organization living somewhere in another building. Microservices. So when you have so many teams all owning many microservices, you start getting quite a lot of them. They are organically growing and driven by needs that are coming from the environment. But they were rather organically because we had these autonomous teams, each one on their island. And around the teams, you have architects trying to keep things together somehow. So this started to become a big problem because you had around there 100 plus teams, 600 plus microservices, and the situation of teams and architects trying to keep on sort of teams trying to get their things going, but starting to talk with many other teams. Because the things they were building, they started to become bigger than what just would be part of their teams. So, you see some events here on the bottom, but there were quite a few developments. So they wanted to scale even more, to grow even more. And at that moment, there was again a moment of, okay, we may need to make a bigger change here. We may need to do something to achieve this sustainable fast flow of change. This is roughly when I was in the company. So it wasn't just me. It's not a coincidence, but I was really fortunate to be part of that mess. So that realization of, hey, we need to do something bigger than just having some other ceremonies or having more planning, or we need to do more, something that is bigger than that. So just to recap, we were in this situation of teams owning the things on their scope of work, and architects trying to manage more and more of that dot connecting that would cross challenges that cross multiple teams. And this is a sketch of what was a change that we introduced. So we stopped having just autonomous teams, and we started looking for opportunities of seeing where are groups of teams that work closely with each other, and trying to have some way of having those teams collaborating more closely with each other and defining what is that thing that we are building together. For example, if you go to Amazon, their first page has many things. There are many things coming there. And those things should make sense with each other, right? What you are searching should be sort of aligned to what is being recommended and not sort of contradicting each other. So that's by having this part here where teams know what they are part of, and those teams there are collaborating more, you can start achieving more of that alignment. And to help with that, the architects that were sort of trying to do things all over the place, connecting people all over the place, they started also to being part of that team here. So architects, together with product manager, so breaking the silo, a product manager moves there and stays with that much closer to these teams, but also engineering manager, so someone that is sort of working and seeing more the people side of all of those teams. That was a big change that we introduced, and this meant that basically we start having much more clarity on what's going on around the teams. So there starts to be like some more ownership of these multi-team related activities. Teams, at that stage, they have been working as DevOps teams for many years, so they were exploring many ways of involving everyone on decision making. And these people around the teams, the shift was, how can we focus on being what Team Topologies calls enabling teams? How can we have those behaviors? We are not designing what the team should be building, but we are looking on how can we create conditions for teams to do that more effectively and look for those parts that cross multiple teams and help them on those activities. So coming back to our yellow slide, so what we ended up having there were these sort of, we stopped having just DevOps teams, we started having these product teams organized into multiple products. So we have these groups of multiple teams that work more closely with each other, align on how to make those products better, identifying what those products are. People sort of move around a bit more freely too, because this is about the same product, so the knowledge they have can also be benefit to another team, can help another team when needed. And the last part here, we were striving to have architecture owned by the teams, close by the teams. And architects and management start having more this enabling behavior. How can I help teams on addressing missing capabilities or skills or challenges they are facing instead of controlling what they should be doing? So, this is what, just in one page, it's a bit small, but like these were the big changes that I was talking about at the beginning. This is not just adding some processes or big frameworks. This is about looking at where are these awkward interactions, where are we having big problems and doing something about those. And I want to highlight that this is not, so don't believe, I'm a consultant. Don't believe a consultant that comes in and tells you, oh, this will be a two-year transformation and you will be able to be much better. Look how many years it took to them. And I'm not saying every organization will need these years, but this is something that is sort of, that's nurtured in an organization, and it will happen as needed. But it takes a long time in general. So, to wrap up, what I really want you to take home after all of these examples and photographies of unexpected events is to embrace that change and uncertainty will not stop for us. I think that's actually very interesting because we are not working on a boring, doing the same thing every day. So it's key that we start as organizations, as people building software, to embrace that and adopt thinking models and practices that help us to notice those challenges and have people that are able to learn about those and decide how to navigate them. And thank you. So you have some contact information here if you want to chat with me. I think I have some time for questions. And I will be around today and tomorrow, so you can always pick my brain. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eduardo. So I hope you still have the Slido link so that you can ask questions on Slido. We don't have so many yet, but I'll just pop up the first one, and then we'll see what comes in during your answer. So regarding the last slide, do you think it would have been possible to start with product teams in mind, or was that whole journey necessary?
I get this question many times. I think, in general, organizations tend to go through a rather similar phase. If they are growing from a startup to a huge, scale-up company. So this phase here in the middle, you don't yet have a lot of, you don't know exactly what those products are. So having teams that are able to work on different scopes and things that are being demanded by the environment allows to start seeing what are those boundaries. And then I think it's clever to be aware of these patterns. So if you see opportunities that doesn't fit the cognitive load of a single team, how can we create structures such as product teams that allow for that to be scaled up and grown? So yeah, I think keeping that in mind, but my experience is that you tend to go through a journey that is similar to this.
Okay, thank you very much for that one. Any other questions? And you don't have to ask them on Slido. You can also just raise your hand, but having them on Slido makes it much easier. Oh yeah, that's nice. The story ends in 2019. I think my org is there too. What's next?
Yeah. So I left the company in 2022, but because I left the company, I can only use slides that I used before. So I just have this. And so after that, some of the things we were doing at that stage here, more towards the end, was heavily investing on going into, you cannot read that, but it's like, how can you learn faster across teams? Like, how can you detect challenges that are common to many teams and avoid that we had more than 150 teams when I left. So you don't want to have, 20, 30 teams fighting the same fight. You want to see where common challenges are coming and allow those people to figure out things. Because they are the ones that are fighting I'm using very strong words here, but like the challenges, they are seeing them. So this is when we started creating enabling teams to work on those shared challenges and then help everyone that would benefit from that. And furthermore, also 2022, we also invested on improving the platforms in the organization as real platforms, not just the platform engineering thing we hear a lot today. So having those challenges drive what should be coming to platform. What are the teams looking for and need? So that was also a very explicit thing we did. Another one was the making explicit the role of product tech lead. So remember this, by adding this, we had people, the architects I was mentioning, addressing challenges that were cross teams. There were some people that would take the lead on doing that. informally on their free time. So we made that role an official role. Like people are empowered to spend time on doing that because this benefits everyone. So these were a few things that happened a bit more towards 2022. Well, and I know they are doing more of these as I speak.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think we have time for 1 or 1.5 more questions. And
Who's
the
the
topmost
half?
right now is, do you have any obvious methods or tools to ease the introduction of the ownership of the architecture for the teams?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. I think there is probably no single answer there. You really need to understand how are these teams, where are they? I think you need to meet them there. In some organizations, people are already rather feeling empowered and safe, and then you can start more quickly allowing them to do that. But in many organizations, I think the most effective, that would be probably my default answer if I didn't know what's going on, is making sure that the architects that are around the teams shift into coaching the teams. Like, how do you get them to coach the teams and get them to actually drive the designing and decision making? That would be my default. But then it really depends. You may need to, for example, invest a lot on promoting and having events where people meet each other and they start feeling, okay, this is a safe place, we can do this. And having leadership, also this is extremely important, CTO, CEO, being there and sharing this with them. Because then they see that leadership is doing that, so it's probably fine for us to do it too. It's fine to mess up a few times, and we should learn from that. So it's a bit of not a straight answer, but I think these are some of the things I would be keeping in mind if I would be doing this for the first time in an organization.
Cool. So there are a lot more interesting questions.
Yes.
You have the chance to talk to Eduardo in the breaks. We have long breaks, especially for that reason. I will just give you one more of the highly rated ones, and that is that it's usually hard for teams to recognize when they're part of the problem themselves. And if you have any ideas on how to foster that learning experience inside the teams.
Inside or across the teams? So I think detecting that teams are part of a bigger problem, this is that adding this clarity of what are you part of? Every team is part of something in an organization, unless this is a one-team startup. So what are you part of? And having conversations with the others that are part of that thing. So this is the first thing to start having, like, naturally, people seeing, we should probably change this recommendation algorithm because it's affecting the search algorithm, and we don't want the search to be affected. So having that part, and then it's really about, I think we saw the book in the morning, getting people to talk, right? So having regular things where you talk and share what you are doing. And for example, in this organization, we had monthly demos. We had all sorts of events that when you go in and you say, oh, so much money on drinks and by having people going through that, people will share what they are doing, and someone else will say, oh, maybe you should try that. Or so again, it's not a one-off answer, but these are a few things that I have seen working rather effectively. Yes.
Mostly investing time and patience into people.
Yes, cool. Which is something that sometimes is difficult to do, right?
It is.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And